West Hill United is a progressive spiritual community where how you live is more important than what you believe. West Hill United is a people, a place, an idea. We are a community living out of a progressive faith, striving to make a positive difference in our own lives, the lives of others, and the world. Join us Sundays at 10:30 a.m. or connect with us at any time.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our gathering on this rather chilly morning here in Southeast Scarborough, where we're enjoying the last of the colorful autumn leaves. West Hill is located in Treaty 20 in the area of the Williams Treaties of 1923. These are the lands of the Mississauga of the Credit First Nation and were previously occupied by the Seneca and Huron-Wendat First Nations. This place is and will continue to be home to Indigenous peoples as long as the sun shines, the grass grows, and the rivers flow. With this Sunday being a day of remembrance of our past loved ones, and November 11th is not far off, I wondered how many of you know that this coming Friday, November 8th, is National Indigenous Veterans Day. I would like to share some little-known facts with you about the First, Second, and Korean Wars. Voluntary enlistment was high. In Aboriginal communities where health and education levels were advanced, virtually every eligible man joined the armed forces. However, due to poverty and diseases on reserves, hundreds and perhaps thousands of Indigenous people were unable to pass medical examinations that were required in order to enlist. In the First World War, more than 300 status Indians died. Hundreds of others were wounded, many of whom died soon after the war. Disease took a heavy toll on Indigenous servicemen. Due to the isolation of many reserves and Aboriginal communities, it meant that immunity to some diseases was low. Indian Affairs reported that at the end of the Second World War, 3,090 status Indians had participated in the war. This figure does not include non-status Indians, Inuit, and Métis soldiers. And so it is estimated that 12,000 Aboriginal people served in the two world wars and in Korea. Status Indian veterans returning from the Second World War found that while they had fought for their country, they had lost their status in the process and had no home to return to. There was a dark side to how the Canadian government treated these communities. Canada expropriated hundreds of thousands of acres of reserve lands during this era. Some of their land was also taken and given to non-Indigenous people as part of a program that granted farmland to returning veterans. The government typically denied this reestablishment program to Indigenous veterans and also treated them unfairly in other ways. Many Indigenous people had hoped their wartime service and sacrifice would increase their rights in Canadian society. But Canada did not treat them the same as other veterans after they returned to civilian life. Often they were denied access to full veteran benefits and support programs. Despite serving on the front lines together, Indigenous veterans were left behind compared to their non-Indigenous comrades. This second-class treatment made their transition to life back home even harder. This discrimination had a negative impact on many brave Indigenous people who had given so much in the cause of peace and freedom. It wasn't until 1995, 50 years after the Second World War, that Indigenous people were allowed to lay wreaths at the National War Memorial in Ottawa. May they rest in peace. And so, for those of you joining us from afar and joining us here in the room, we invite you to reflect on the personal relationships you might have with Indigenous peoples where you live, and in particular to familiarize yourselves with the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. Again, a warm welcome to those meeting with us here and to those on Zoom in the Scarborough area, across Canada, the US, the United Kingdom, and beyond. Welcome. We have 3 readings for you this morning. The first reading is by the American author and Presbyterian minister Frederick Buechner. One life on this earth is all that we get, whether it is enough or not enough. And the obvious conclusion would seem to be that at the very least we're fools if we do not live it as fully and bravely and beautifully as we can. Our second reading is from the work of Rita Mae Brown, a feminist author and civil rights activist. I still miss those I loved who are no longer with me, but I find I am grateful for having loved them. The gratitude has finally conquered the loss. And our final reading brings together the wisdom of two writers separated in time by approximately 2,500 years, each echoing each other's observation and the loss of someone well known and well loved. The first is Seneca, the Roman philosopher, satirist, playwright, and political leader. And the second is John Steinbeck, best known for his novels The Grapes of Wrath and Of Mice and Men, but who also served as a war correspondent during the Second World War. Seneca wrote, "The comfort of having a friend may be taken away, but not the comfort of having had one." And 2 millennia later, Steinbeck wrote, "It's so much darker when a light goes out than it would have been if it had never shone." Offered as wisdom for the journey, may we walk in its light.
And I want to extend our thoughts so that we are celebrating the lives that are now in the past and celebrating the lives we know that are in the present, and then our own, to celebrate our own life. So celebrating those that have passed, celebrating the lives of those we know in the present, and celebrating your own life. And I found a pack of words used to celebrate, and we're very familiar with them. Someone could be praising someone. They could be saluting someone. And an old-fashioned word is laud, to laud someone. You could do that this afternoon. You could go up to someone and say, "I am lauding you for your whatever," and then you quickly explain that it's a good thing. There's the word exalt, to exalt someone's accomplishments. A very religious term would be, but it's not necessarily, to glorify, to glorify. It actually is a verb, to carol. To carol, and as we've talked about before, a carol is not a Christmas carol. It's called a Christmas carol because there are Easter carols and other kinds of carols, and to carol someone is also to celebrate them, to hail them. Hail to the, to the chief. Oh, that's big right now. To cheer someone. If you've been at a child's game, hockey, whatever kind, and you've cheered them on, you're celebrating them. To emblazon their name. I've often written people's names up and emblazon. To eulogize is to give a speech in praise of someone, to acclaim them, to commemorate them, to solemnize their memory, to consecrate, to fete, to celebrate them, to remember, and lastly, to keep. And I like that one. To keep someone's memory, to keep someone in. The opposites of those are to overlook or ignore, to blame or to criticize, and that can be part of it too. So I'm going to ask you to look back in your memory for people that are gone, long gone in your families, long gone, or your friends. And it could be a mixture. It could be that you're remembering these folks with such joy and such enjoyment of the memory, and you could also be remembering such sadness or illness that was in their lives, and you could also be remembering that you didn't like them at all, not a bit. That they were on your family tree, which we don't get to prune ourselves, but there's mixture in remembering lives past. Much of my work, and some of you, is with people who are unpacking so much of the lives in their past or present that have actually been part of damaging and part of sadness and part of regret. And so we can't ignore that, but we can think of, and I'm going to ask you, and we don't still have the, Aidan is working on a program that will put a little blurb over everyone's head, and we will be able to see what you're thinking all the time. No, that's not coming. No, only Aidan can see it. No, but the idea is if you could just fill the room with your thoughts, with people that you're celebrating from the past. And I can look here and even name some, Wayne and Jean and Marion and Dorothy and Ashlyn. And we'll be naming names later, but people that we have loved and held with as a treasure. And I'm going to quote the author of the Winnie the Pooh stories and say, how lucky am I to have someone that makes saying goodbye so hard. And so the hard that you went through when you said goodbye to my father and to my mother, to yours as well, how lucky we were to have someone that it was hard to say. And may I amplify that hard. Sometimes it was horrifically hard to say goodbye. And so we hold each other in those mixtures. I want you to put in that blurb that we can't see, just think back in your memory, someone whose character you really admired. They're not here with us anymore, but you admired them. And that's a way we celebrate that. So I invite you to celebrate that. I want you to think of someone whose acts of kindness touched your heart. That person just had the right word or the right action, the right hand on yours, and it meant so much. If you could think back to someone who's not with us any longer, but they taught you something so valuable in your life. And I'm going to split that in two. Someone who taught you something that enriched your life and was so, you were so glad to receive it. And then someone who taught you things you didn't want to hear, you didn't want to know, they were wrong. And then later on you realized, oh, maybe I was a bit wrong there. And so we expanded because of what they shared. And I'm going to ask you to think of someone in your past, someone that is no longer with us, that showed bravery in their difficulties. And then I'm going to ask you to remember someone that sometimes couldn't muster the bravery. And they just gave in, and you were part of that, and you tried to help. And that's the whole idea of our lives. It's a mixture. Someone who shared your burden and sorrow just the right way. Just the right way. Worth celebrating, worth remembering. And for those that we often, I was at a grief seminar a long time ago, and the teacher said, the best way to make sure your grief will be healthy is to keep your family relationships as current as you can. To keep them current, or to settle with the fact that some part of it didn't work as well before the death, to sort of come to terms with things as they are. Ruth read Seneca's statement, the comfort of having a friend may be taken away, but not the comfort of having had one. Worth celebrating. Now, for all of those in your life that are alive, as far as we know at the moment, are alive somewhere, and they're in your life, that they're worth celebrating. So I want you to picture in that blurb of yours someone who is presently alive and causes you to smile. Worth celebrating. Remember someone who is bravely handling their life. Worth celebrating. Someone who has the knack of caring for you or for others, and you look at that and you think, that is so beautiful. That is worth celebrating. And someone that knows how to speak, a word fitly spoken is like apples in a pitcher of gold. That's from Proverbs. A word fitly spoken. That's worth celebrating. Someone whose character you admired and wanted to learn to be like. Someone whose character right now that you remember, you're thinking of, and they are worth celebrating. And someone who cared for you when you were limping or struggling, and you know that right now they would do it again. That's worth celebrating. And then I want to ask us to extend that, people that are alive presently worth celebrating, than what people we don't know. And I'm going to bet you have read or heard about someone in the past week that you'll never meet, but you're glad you got to know that they're doing what they're doing, and that's worth celebrating, to celebrate their life and what they're doing with it. And then we come to the quote from the Presbyterian minister that Ruth read. One life on this earth is all that we get, whether it's enough or not enough in our own estimation. But the obvious conclusion he came to was, it would seem that at the very least, we're kind of foolish if we don't live it as fully and bravely and as beautifully as we can. And that's what we do together too, to help each other in our present life, the life we've got, and to live that as bravely. And some of us and some of you are handling things that require bravery, and with beauty and fully, and some of us are handling a lot and beautifully. Some of us are handling it with such a grace and such a gift for other people. So celebrate that you laugh, and celebrate that you share burdens of others, and celebrate that you stand by someone who is hurting. Celebrate that you met a need last week. Celebrate that you overcame a prejudice, and it was so hard, but you landed on the other side, and you're very glad you did. And celebrate that you cared for someone that was hurting. And sometimes we don't even know that that's happening and what we're doing for them. So to celebrate the lives in the past, and to celebrate the lives in the present, and to celebrate our own life. And sometimes we can't see what that is. And so for someone who saw more deeply than many of us, named Helen Keller, said, "The best and most beautiful things in the world cannot be seen or even touched, but just felt in the heart." Just felt in the heart. So with open and grateful hearts, let us celebrate the lights that have been in our lives. And I say this with such respect and care, that there's those of us here for whom that is very recent, and not something that the word celebrate comes to mind. Much more grief and sadness. And so we're together holding that. There's no wrong or right way to be doing this today. Whatever your need is, just exactly as you have need, may that be filled by the love in this room. And so I'm going to ask Babette to sing to us a song she has chosen for this special time together. And then I will call on Anne and Kevin, who are going to be our readers over there, and they will be lighting, that's Peter and Gary will be lighting the candles. Now, if this is new to you, it is not a candle per name. We don't light a candle for someone. We're lighting candles to fill the room with the light that we try to be in the world. And so there's no, it's not a ceremony or a mystery going on there. It's purely loving the light. On our longest night service, we say to each other, "You are light in the world." And so we build that light at the front till the end. And when we finish, and sometimes the names go on longer than the candles, and sometimes the candles go on longer than the names. But we're just going to have a quiet time with them lit in the room, just to feel that. And whatever, as I said, however, exactly as you have need, open your heart to that happening, because we've been together honoring this. So, Babette. I'm going to ask Kevin and Anne to come to the podium. We're just going to shift over a little bit. And we'll get this. And if Peter and Gary could take their place around the table.
First of all, let me say to everyone here and on Zoom that we are honored to read out the names that you have all offered us today, because I always feel that we don't we don't leave our loved ones behind and move on. We take our loved ones with us and move forward. And
Pass this back and forth. Trying to figure this out. Anne Avis, Marion Barrett, Mary Bennett, Harold Bennett, Lillian Bennett, Janice Bennett Pritting,
Cameron Blake, Fred Blakey, Joy Blakey, Murray Blakey, Sharon Blanc,
Bill Blythe, Keith Bolton, Noella Boone, Arthur Boone, Dave Brown,
Richard Camage, Tony Chan, Carter Chase, Dorothy Clark, Harry Cleland, Patricia Cleland,
David Condy, Carolyn Cook, Dorothy Crawford, Wayne Crosley, Peter Crowley, Marion Cruikshank, Robert Cruikshank,
Adelaide Daw, William Daw,
Edward DeRosier, Marilyn Dickinson, Richard Dixon, Jean Dixon, Vince DePetty, Maureen DePetty,
Sawyer Drew, Joy Duffield, Annie Evans, Daphne Evans, Bill Fairburn,
Sandra Finch, Reverend Robert Freeland, Margaret Freeland, Eleanor Galster, Bert Greaves, Betty Gill, Ted Gill,
Kay Gostick, Art Gostick, Charles Gostick, Ruth Greaves, Kathy Greaves,
Jean Hamill, Carolyn Hannaford, Arthur Henderson, Dorothy Herlihy,
Jim Hockley, William Hockley, James Highland, Maureen Highland, Jim Irwin,
Holly Jackson, Franklin Kearns, Sophia Kearns, Arlene Kelland, Ricarda Kite,
Yvonne Kilroy, Victor Koop, Hans Liepel, Corey Liepel, Vito Lisho.
Robert Lockhart, Audrey Lodge Blakey, Raymond Lloyd, Tessa McCallum, Morgan Mack,
Joan Maynard, Ed Maynard, Verna Maynard, Brian Maynard.
Dorothy McCormack, Harry McCormack, Isabel MacArthur, Kevin McDonald, Ashlyn Megson,
Diane Moorhouse, Eileen Monroe, Michael David Newton, Kevin O'Keefe, George Oliver,
Margaret Peters, Agnes Peters, Ted Petrowski, Daryl Pring, Carson Quinn,
Ginny Ramsey, Gordon Ramsey, Paul Ramsbottom, Lillian Ramsbottom, Marion Reed,
Doug Richards, Aileen Robb, Frank Robb, Robina Russell, Art Russell,
Lily Sims, Ross Sims, Jim Spence, Betty Spence, Les Spurrier,
Linda Strange, Hal Stewart, Sue Thomas, David Thompson, Paulina Thornley, Emily Trivers, Hansi
van Rossum, Jessica Volk, Velma Vosper, George Vosper, Phil Wadsworth, Jean Wormington,
Orville White, Moira Whiteford, Elaine Wilcox, Elizabeth Wilt, Frederick Wilt, Carrie Warabus,
Tom O'Neill, Corrine Rivers, James Jennings, Jose Oliveira. And that concludes the names. We'll have a moment's silence. Just sit here.
Thank you both. Wait, sit there. As they are completing the light at the front, I'm just going to play Some of you who have been West Hill for a long time could remember many of those names and picture them. Some of you that are newer, many of the names were not familiar to you. There's probably one or two for everyone on the list that you remember. And there's people I know because I put them there, but you don't know them, and vice versa. And the idea here is that we are celebrating all of them together. So I'm just going to play as we feel the beauty of that light.
Become a sustaining champion of West Hill United's work by committing to an automatic monthly donation. Learn more or donate now through Canada Helps.